what's going on with Pete Hexted. Moments ago, we've learned from Pete Hexted, and he's trying to update people from what's going on, considering what's going on in the Middle East. And here is what Pete Hexted said.
It's like this whole idea of the war widening. That's what the press wants to make it look like it's widening and chaos is ensuing. No, we're actually closing in on grabbing hold of and controlling what objectives we want to achieve and how we want to achieve them. It's called shaping operations and setting the conditions. But when you shape the environment, you don't always tell. I mean, foolish political leaders and foolish military leaders of the past will hang an exact deadline on it. Or here's exactly when we'll do what we're going to do, or here's how long it's going to take us. And then if you meet that, maybe you meet it, but if you don't, you fail. And if you're far beyond, we know exactly what we're shaping and why. We're sending those signals working across the interagency. The Strait of Hormuz is something we've paid attention to from the beginning. And the American people can rest assured we will ensure that our interests are advanced, no doubt.
Yeah. He's a liar.
Larry, he even looks evil, doesn't it to you? Yeah. He looks evil.
Yeah.
I would not be presenting that kind of image to the American people now. He looks evil.
I learned yesterday that I'm not going to mention which base, but it's one of the most important bases that we have been carrying out operations from. Their air defense is depleted, and the ground force commander, when he was reporting this back, was it was described to me that the people that were in the crisis action team listening, they all went silent. It's bad. So what the Iranians have done is they're in the process of completely shutting down U.S. military presence throughout the Persian Gulf. I mean, Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, it's done. It's toast. Prince Sultan Air Base, I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to continue operations there. I think Al Udeid is effectively shut down. Then there are 10 other minor bases and minor airfields. But then at the same time, the shutdown of oil by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, that is the most consequential thing that Iran could have done, and it gives it leverage. I wrote a piece. I did a piece last night on game theory, and walked through different iterations. Their closure of that strait has given Iran a leverage that is, there's no precedent for this in history, actually, because the oil that flows out, the liquid natural gas that flows out, and the urea, nitrogen for fertilizer that flows out, that's the most impactful, because almost a little more than a third of the world's fertilizer comes out of the Persian Gulf. I didn't know that until I started looking into this. So we're now starting on week 3, and with no fertilizer, this is planting season, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. You're going to have a food crisis in 6 to 8 months, because potentially a third of the world's food supply could disappear. So Iran, in its position right now, it's able to apply economic pain as well as military pain, and it's going to compel the United States to come to the table. The U.S. is not going to be able to withstand this.
Just to amplify that, I had someone send me a telephone, cell phone picture of a pump in Los Angeles yesterday, $8.69 a gallon.
Yeah, I don't know what it's done up in your area, but down here in Florida, because the United States only gets about 8% of its oil out of the Persian Gulf. Gas prices. So a week ago, Monday, I bought gas at $2.50. On Sunday, I bought it. I paid $3.04. On Wednesday, I checked out the price, and it had gone up 15 cents to $3.19. And then yesterday, it was up to $3.24. And that's just here in Florida. we don't have all the taxes that they do in California, but
Yeah.
this is going to set off a political firestorm, and all of the spin and crap that the Trump people are putting out is not going to save them. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
It seems there's something going on because did you see the video in which Scott Bessent was called by the president during an interview? He was when he came back, he was somehow shaking. Look at just the footage.
I listened to you on the.
The president wants you. Sorry, the president wants you very well.
Oh, okay. Okay. No problem at all. See you shortly, Mr. Secretary.
You can work that in.
Mr. Secretary, I have to say, it's a first, I'm sure a last as well, that an interviewee's been pulled away to go to the Situation Room. How was the president? Was he stressed?
No, the president is in great spirits. The Iranian mission is proceeding well ahead of schedule, and I have to tell you, Wolf, that I've a teenager who's considering military service, and I could give this team my highest compliment, from President Trump to the head of the Joint Chiefs to the Secretary of War. I would say that I would trust my child's life in their hands.
He's gay.
I bet he won't go there. I bet he won't go there.
I mean,
but he has kids.
Hmm.
He left South Carolina because they made it constitutionally. The courts overthrew their local laws about no same-sex marriage. So South Carolina, my wonderful state, went and made it a constitutional amendment. So Scott had to move to New York, to a Biden state, in order to maintain his same-sex marriage and have his kids. That is a dissembling dude there. I mean, you can't make this up.
Yeah.
Larry, Pete Hegseth today said that the Iranian leadership, they're all in the bunkers, hiding in the bunkers. And today there was a protest in Iran going on because of the Quds. They call it the Quds, the movement, the protest for Palestinians in Iran. And we've seen the president out, the head of national security, all the officials were among the people, the head of, justice system of Iran. And how you can argue something, and you have to have some sort of, foundation, because it's all out. It's in the media. They're out. They're among people. And you're arguing that they're hiding in bunkers because of what's going on. And we have the total control over Iran, because yesterday I talked with Andrei Martyanov. He said something amazing. Look at the map and the targets in Iran. You see the targets mostly are located, to the western part of the country, and then Tehran.
Right.
You don't see that sort of dominance that Pete Hegseth is talking about. Larry, what is your understanding of that?
Well, again, if we're talking about the propaganda war, who's winning the propaganda war, at least in the United States, it's the Trump administration. They've got people convinced of one lie after another. But when you start looking at the hard facts, and I'm glad that Andre pointed that out, because I had noticed that on previous maps, that when you look at where all the hits are, they are, like right down the middle. Well, that's explained by the fact that I think they're largely dropping JASSM. If they're not firing Tomahawks, they're dropping a JASSM missile. And that has a range of about 500 miles. So if you're staying outside of the western border of Iran, you can fire, say 300-400 miles into Iran to hit these targets. But the Pentagon's lying. I just saw today they put out that this KC-135 crashed in Iraq. No, it didn't. It was shot down. It was shot down because there were two planes, and the second plane saw the flash from this surface-to-air missile that hit the first plane. The second plane was able to take evasive maneuvers and avoid getting hit.
Yeah.
So, but they're lying about it. So, oh no, just an accident. That they've been covering up casualties. This tendency to try to win the war with the words, as opposed to what's happening on the ground. And when you step back and say, okay, what's actually happening on the ground? Yes, we're destroying lots of targets. I'm not sure what those targets are in Iran. We're causing death and destruction, but Iran has very methodically first destroyed the ground radars that were used to both identify targets and handle communication functions for both the maritime and the whole airspace in the Middle East. If about $4 to $5 billion, you destroy 7 radars, and the cost of that is $7 billion, something in that category, or $5 billion, an incredible amount of money. You destroy and make uninhabitable the U.S. military bases and installations, so they're not conducting business as usual, and they're being forced out. In fact, my understanding is that Kingdom of Saudi Arabia told the folks at Prince Sultan Air Base, "You're on your own, man. This is we're out of this. You're on your own." So the economic damage that's being done bit by bit with Dubai, United Arab Emirates, or United Arab Emirates, where Dubai is, in Qatar, where Doha is. This is nothing that's just going to be a net, like a shaving cut. This is more like an amputation. So the Iranians, I would hope that they're in a bunker somewhere, instead of parading around out about, because we're a group of murderers in the United States. I mean, this is, I tried to explain to my son the other night. I said, the last person that really conducted an invasion, an unprovoked invasion of another country, well, apart from us, routinely, was Adolf Hitler. He started World War I. What Trump did on February 28th with Bibi Netanyahu would stand as the principal charge in a Nuremberg trial of starting a war of aggression without justification. And I mean, it's a level of such profound evil. I am angered by it.
And it shouldn't be a surprise to us, a man that will order people killed on the high seas the way he has and get over 100 deaths out of it. I mean, this is what we've got today. And oh, by the way, your Scott Bessent little video there reminded me of the fact that maybe what Trump told him at that moment, I don't know, but I can surmise, was that he just lifted all sanctions on Russia in a phone call with Putin so that Putin could help him deal with this oil crisis and prices.
Yeah.
Carl,
Remember how adamant Bessent was about those sanctions? Several speeches he gave about, we're going to twist them, this is it. This is going to bring them down, Sorry, your president just lifted them. Sorry, go ahead.
Carl, part of what Pete Hegseth and General Kane are trying to do is to convince at least the military, those people who were in the military, who are right now in the military, to convince them that the situation is not going badly for the United States. How capable have they been so far to convince the people in the military who have the knowledge of what's going on?
It's an indirect pipeline, but as you know, I think I'm an advisory member to the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and we hear from GIs every day. Not just about religious issues, but sometimes in those discussions of religious issues, which are now coming in numbers we've never seen before. I don't know if you saw my article the other day, but I got permission and quoted a couple of them talking about their commanders at combat status briefings, saying things like, "Don't worry, guys, God's on our side. Don't worry, Jesus Christ is with us in this war." These kinds of communications are coming in all the time now, but sometimes there are other things that come in with them. And there's some very deep concern amongst what I would call the real core of the United States Army in particular, but the Air Force too, and the Navy to a certain extent. The ranks that run from 03, which is the last rank where you really are a warrior, captain, up to and including colonels and captain equivalents in the Navy and the Coast Guard. The real concern is we don't know what we're doing. And we're demonstrating that on a classic scale, really, that is apparent, at least in some ways. I think that's a real concern for Kane and a real concern ultimately for Hegseth, but it's more of a concern for the Central Command commander and those initially beneath him, because it's called morale and welfare of the troops. And you don't want to be engaged in a conflict with morale and welfare of the troops being questioned by those very troops. And you certainly don't want to be in it in a situation where, as Larry just intimated, and I think he's absolutely right, we're lying through our teeth about all manner of things that, at least in some ways, they see and they know about, and they understand they're hearing lies. This doesn't give them confidence in their leadership, particularly Hegseth. I think there's a very bifurcated opinion in the ranks of Hegseth. The Christian nationalists and those who are attracted to that sort of thing are with him. Others are not necessarily against him, but they are increasingly so. And that's pretty strange for down in that level of rank to be remarking about your secretary. Last time I saw that was with McNamara in Vietnam. Really extensive remarks in the ranks that were very derogatory about McNamara. So this is not a good thing. It's not a good development. And as Larry said, we are not winning this war. Yesterday, day before, I guess it was recorded, John Mearsheimer with Chris Hodges was talking about the escalation ladder. And I think he's right. Trump has put his foot on the first rung, which is our air power, which you may have seen the four-star commanding all the forces in Europe denounced literally in a hearing before the Congress the other day when he said, air power has never won anything. This is a blue suitor with 4 stars on his arms. And granted, he's the one in charge of the nuts in EUCOM that want to take on Putin. But nonetheless, he told the truth there. I wonder if that's gotten back to Trump yet. Surely it has. But he told the truth, and he cited the London Blitz as an example. I could have cited several other examples. So that's the first rung of the ladder. The next rung is limited ground power. And the question now is Trump going to step up to that rung? And I guarantee you the military will not be happy about that in its leadership or its ranks, because I think they viscerally know, if not intellectually know, we can't do it.
Yeah.
We can't do it. We simply can't do it. We went over the selective service system again yesterday with people like Bernie Rosker and other who were head of the selective service for Reagan. We have had this movement going on in the all volunteer force forum for almost 15 years now. It would take you a year or more and over $100 million to get the selective service system into shape to where you could begin a draft. And in that period, we all agreed that a third of American youth between the ages of 18 and 24 would disappear, and they'd either leave the country or they'd go in deep hiding. So you can't mobilize this country in time to make a difference, and you might not even be able to do it in sufficient numbers to make a difference. So if he takes, as John indicated, if he takes that next step on that escalation ladder, we're in deep kimchi. We're in trouble. And I haven't even talked about, as Larry was beginning to get into, the economic ramifications, because they are manifest and they are on us already.
Yeah, they haven't calculated the cost of this across the board. I mean, let's go to this issue of ground troops. I'm fascinated with the number of people who know nothing about military and logistics who are saying, "Yeah, we need to send troops." Well, 25 years ago or 23 years ago, yeah, we could assemble a force in Saudi Arabia over a course of 9 months to a year, that they started the flow, what's called the tip fiddle, this flow of troops and units and equipment, concentrating them in one area. That was the days of pre-drones and the widespread use of missiles and ISR. Couldn't do that today. Or we could try, and then they'd be wiped out. So there is not the safe way to conventionally do that. You'd have to build them up in Iraq, near the border of Iran. Well, Iran has been just lashing the daylights out of Erbil, the Kurdish-controlled airport that we've used as a staging base. They're getting pummeled. So you couldn't do that. Well, let's use the special operations personnel. Okay, I only worked with that group for 23 years, so I know a thing or two about capabilities. In fact, I learned early on when I first started at State. I worked for a retired Marine colonel. He did 2 tours in Vietnam. He's the one that set up diplomatic security at State Department, actually, back in 1984. And and he was the principal liaison when we did Operation in Grenada. Well, in Grenada, we dropped in a group of Navy SEALs. Yeah, they can swim, they're tough. After we had drowned 5 of them, and they died, so he sent in a new group. And this group is led by a guy named he was a lieutenant commander at the time, named Rick Woolard, and they were to grab the general, the consul general or the governor of Grenada to bring him out. Well, they got Navy SEALs. They basically carry rifles. They're not heavily armed. Okay, they had at this time I think they're carrying an H&K that was shooting a 7.62 by 51 round. So it's a substantial round. Nonetheless, they got pinned down. They couldn't move. There was some Cuban that had a 50 cal machine gun spraying them. They had to wait for the Marine Corps to come roaring up the road with tanks and armored vehicles in order to secure it. So the point is, they're not even light infantry. They're capable for short time missions, but to insert them all the way into Iran and to try to go capture a hardened, deeply buried target and take out nuclear material, and then tell you what, I worked on an exercise like that, and it's just the lesson learned was don't do it. That's the lesson learned. So there is not a ground option here available, because what are you gonna do? Drop in the 82nd? Because they supposedly have been activated and are moving to the area. Okay, drop them in. Then what? They're not. They don't come equipped to sustain operations for more than about 48 hours. I mean, this is so people watch too many of these damn Hollywood movies where soldiers can do superhuman feats and not have to worry about logistics.
Just a couple more points on that, Nima. In Desert Shield, we dropped, as I recall, 2 battalions of the 82nd almost immediately, on the point where if Saddam turned and went into Saudi Arabia, which is what we really feared, he would we knew they would be killed. Every one of them would be killed, but he'd be rolling over and killing American troops. And so we were looking for that. I'm sad to say, but we were looking for that as an additional incentive, if you will, for the American people to support the war. We were sacrificing the 82nd. And as to putting someone there now, we would use the ROM facility in Kuwait. I'm quite convinced of that. It's the largest reception and onward movement facility we have in the region and in the world, really, other than maybe still in Europe to a certain extent. Look at a map. I talked about this on a podcast this morning. Look at a map. You'd have to go through that little arm of Iraq that features Basra, and you'd have to go in some very difficult territory to get into Iran if you did that. Wasn't the same thing with Iraq, of course. So that's out of the question, I think. And then the other sort of proposal I've heard from military people was amphibious bottoms and Marines. And I said, okay, first problem is you got to find the amphibious bottoms. Check out the debate going on between the Navy and the Marine Corps over the Navy's lack of funding and the Navy's lack of funding even for maintenance for these amphibious bottoms. So let's say you gather all the amphibious bottoms and maybe you put 5,000 Marines in. Guess what? Where are they going and what are they going to do? Well, we'd land on the beaches. We'd use the beaches and we'd flow in like the Marines are supposed to do. And we'd put 100. Well, you're not going to get 100,000 Marines. You might get 60,000 deployables and they'd all be killed on the beach or very inside the beach, if you will, by missiles, probably. So this is just fraught with enormous problems if you're going to use land power. And not just the difficulty of getting it there in the first place without massive casualties. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the manpower. And as I said, we couldn't get it for a year or so, and then it would be fractious. Do you know that 30%, I'm told by reliable sources, 30% of the Israeli reserves have not answered the 90,000 call-up that Netanyahu issued a few days ago in order to go on with Lebanon and to do what he's doing? They got 30,000 people that didn't show up. Think about lots more than that for us. So as John said, this is preposterous for him to take that next step on the ladder and begin to introduce ground forces. And of course, we haven't even talked about what happened with Erdogan and the Kurds. The Kurds, if they were going to be recruited, they were smarter this time than they've been in the past. And they said, not on your life. Because not only would they have the Iranians in front of them, formidable Iranians, they would also have probably Erdogan behind them, taking the opportunity to wipe them out. So this is, they're just not thinking in this administration, or they're thinking behind time, very much behind time. All of this is an attempt to cover up not having conceived the operation properly in the first place. And it's going to, as Larry just indicated with the aircraft in Iraq, it's going to continue to cost people's lives, because catching up is pretty hard to do when the enemy is trying to keep you out of that realm. And they're doing a good job of it.